searching, I remember I was born with the answer. Through the fire, through the pressure, I emerge with the standard. I don't follow, I awaken. Ain't no man like I'm the root, I'm the branches, I'm the law and the language. Yeah.
And just like that, y'all, we are back. Welcome back to another round of My Patriot Report Live. I'm the bridge connecting the next generation to federal contracting. I am Ratwan Hill. And with me, I have the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Ambassador of Peace. And if you don't know who he is by now, you might want to ask Anthropic, Mr. Walter Cotton III. Mr. Cotton, man, how was the weekend? How was the 4th?
I had a wonderfully quiet 4th. It was so amazingly hot. I had to do everything that I could to keep the dome cool.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Let's talk. You know what? And that was something I was actually going to bring up about this heat wave, because I was seeing on news that people in Europe was dying. Now, I'm not going to say that this seems like a reiteration or a pattern that happened because my memory serves me correctly, this happened during COVID, where they were saying it was an extreme heat surge and people in Europe was dying. It was a recession. I'm seeing a lot of similar patterns. It may be the situation is different, but from my perspective, it seems like some of the patterns are kind of similar.
I mean, I don't know whether, directed energy weapon, weather modification changes, they shut down CERN so people are able to sleep. I don't know if that particular rabbit hole is the one we want to go down right now, but it was hot this weekend. That's for sure.
That part. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, I want to start the discussion now with a question that I asked you earlier, and that I asked you privately, but I did want to bring this question out because hopefully it brings out the older generation. And that question I asked you was, do you think that most of the individuals who are intellects that are very experienced died in the war? Do you think that they are just how you could say they're on their boat fishing, they're in the cut, or is it just not that many elders that the younger generation could look to for guidance? Is that out there? Is that not out there? What are your thoughts on that? The older generation being.
Wow, that's a really interesting question. So I'm thinking that what I'm hearing you say is that you believe that there need to be more relationships like the one that you and I have, where the older generation is actively working to provide a hand up to the younger generation. And what I think you just indicted the older ethnic generation for is being asleep at the wheel, right? Being away
I'm asking the question. I don't know. I'm fortunately to be blessed with the relationship, but I'm the broad community. I don't know what it looks like. This is my first time being able to engage with somebody older. So and I'm 31. So I don't know.
Well, I will say that it's my experience that we have a healthy infrastructure out there for mentorship. We have a age-old fraternal order on both the female and the male side of the equation, whether you're talking about the alphas or the Qs or the AKAs that represent organizations of mature individuals and a good population of them that are and should be playing the role of mentors in their communities. The question is one of effectiveness, right? As we look at today's measure in terms of the upward mobility of the constituents that they serve. And the truth of the matter is, economically, the needle for people who wear my social uniform, your social uniform, has not moved significantly. And that indictment suggests that something different needs to be done. And so I would submit that many of my contemporaries have bought into the idea of the colonizers. And so they work diligently to get the right sheepskin, move into the proper neighborhood, and get their 401k in the position so that they could retire and travel in their later days. And many of them are aggressively pursuing and functionally pursuing those strategies, losing sight of the need that they have, the obligation that they have to the village. And so I would not submit that they are not out there. I would submit that they are out there in number. I just think that there needs to be more of a wake-up call so that they can realize their responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm a, you know, what you say, look at the three fingers pointing back at you, right? So for my generation, and I asked you this question in private before as well, you know, how many people from my generation and younger have you actually interfaced with? And you told me that, you know, it hasn't been that many, you know, so it seems like that us not coming to the table, rather, I'm not sure if it's a lack of knowing about, you know, federal contracting. My experience is that, you know, it's most people in this industry are, you know, older than me. You know, they're a little bit more older than me. I haven't seen too many people my age, so I'm not sure if that's an environmental if it's the environment, the reason why younger generation more evolved, lack of understanding, lack of knowing. What has been your experience with the lack of younger generations participating?
You know, and I can tell you that in my 20 plus year advocacy, veterepreneur development career, you are the second young man that has caught my fancy in the way that you have. And as I look back over that historic horizon, that's crazy, right? Given who I am and what I've done, I should have a stable of young men and women that are following my method and making wealth for their families. And so I can only you know, measure that up to the fact that you're unique, just like the other young man, Mr. Finney. You know, he was a very unique, courageous, bold, intelligent, hardworking individual that knew what he wanted, and you know, he took the reins of this government contracting thing and ran with it as you are. You know, so maybe, you know, we need to ask that question of the audience, right? The people that are, you know, in your age group, you know, where y'all at?
Right. You know, $1.3 trillion.
That has your name on it.
Right.
You know, I mean, I've got this line drawn in the sand image behind me for a reason, because I think it's time for us to draw those lines in the sand. Right? We have a point in time opportunity. We have some crazy shenanigans going on within our country. You know, when you have the 4th of July celebration, where we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of our nation, and we have imagery showing on our screen of neo-Nazis dressed in their full regalia on a subway surrounding a young Black girl, right? You know, reminds me of some earlier days in this nation, right? We still have some issues that we need to resolve. We have some issues that we need to engage. And so I'm going to say this again to, you know, my young ethnic participants, my young ethnic warriors, you know, where y'all at?
Mm-hmm. That brings me to the question. Now, you always say, you know, social uniform. Now, I would assume that a lot of people may not know the difference when you say social costume from social uniform. So can you break that down, what social uniform is, the difference between social costume and social uniform?
Yes, and that's a good question. I'm glad you asked that because I define my social uniform starting with my humanity, right? I'm a human being first, and from that, I raise to the different attributes or clothing that I put on that, right? So I'm a service member, I'm a father, right? I'm a member of a community, but at my core, I'm a human being. My social costume is a thing that I've worked years to differentiate myself from, and that is the skin color, right? That is the race that society wanted to use to subdue me and divide me. And so I always talk about looking for people who wear my social uniform, or working with people who wear my social uniform, because that represents a group of people that have evolved to a certain level of awareness, a certain level of enlightenment, that understand what's important, and they're able to put first things first. Like in this particular instance, right? We're faced with a material challenge. We are faced with a material challenge that has made this nation less safe, right? Our focus from a first things first perspective is majoring in the major thing, and that's the economics, right? We know that we live in a golden rule society. He who has the goal rules. And so we see a point in time opportunity for people who wear my social uniform to utilize the benefits that they have derived from their service to make a demand call against a material wealth transfer. And what Mr. Hill is trying to do is he's trying to show you the example of how easy it is for you to participate in that. And I'm going to put the big talking stick down because I could go deep down this particular reservoir.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's actually a good segue to, diving in deeper to regentrification. But before we go down there, I do want to share this message, guys. If you want to participate in this economic revolution, if you want to join the disabled veterans, and you don't just have to be a disabled veteran, you could be a family member of a disabled veteran. But if you support this movement, we ask that you join the Elite SDVOB network, which now has been made free to join. And if you don't want to join, that's fine as well. We please support us as we continue to educate, advocate, and fight for the veteran population by donating. And you could do that by scanning the barcode. But guys, please, we asking you to participate, because this is not about just veterans. This is about everybody who are patriots and want to do good for their nation.
Can I make one clarification there? Because I said this in the last broadcast, and you've made that statement again. The membership, for the Elite Service Disabled Veteran Network New York chapter is free. You can reach that by utilizing the URL that you see scrolling across the bottom of the page. And I'm making that free for those individuals who equally participate in Mr. Hill's regentrification campaign, because I think that he has a novel idea of taking his benefit and utilizing it to revitalize the community that he came from, right? Larry Ellison, I think he's the founder, or he's the lead BlackRock investor, recently said that the global downturn that we're experiencing can be reversed by a 3% growth in GDP, a 3% growth in your economy. If it's that way on a global level, on a local level, in your community, that number represents it's a goal for you to achieve. And what Mr. Hill has created is he's created an engine that allows any underserved community in America to exceed that 3% growth utilizing federal contracting. That's the regentrification model that he's trying to drive into the community that he came from, and that he's sharing with you all here. And I will turn the big talking stick back over to you now, Mr. Hill, because I think it's important that they smell what you're cooking.
Absolutely, absolutely, guys. And just if this is your first time tuning in and hearing this message, regentrification is simply the same as gentrification, but instead of other investors coming in, rebuilding the community, and ultimately pushing us out, we are coming back and rebuilding our community and putting our people back in, all of our professionals, everybody, and when I even think about that, is like, how do we heal our community? Because that we have a lot of trauma, which is, I think, is part of the reason why we don't come back to that community. Because if you made it out of that trauma, you don't want to go back into that trauma, which is, I think, also a big factor. But I did want to ask this question, when we say regentrification, are we talking about veterans coming back home, or are we talking about veterans coming back into power? Or, when you think of regentrification, what comes to your mind?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is the novelty of the word, right? The play on the word gentrification, right? You had to, have a vision that's bigger than the bigger picture to be able to reverse that scenario. And in order for you to reverse that scenario, you have to have the provisions that accommodate that kind of vision, right?
Yeah.
And so Roxanne Shante, the real Roxanne is the one that I heard coin it. And of course, this is an individual that, made her success in the entertainment industry and went back into the community that she came out of, bought up a few apartment buildings and yada, 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 regentrification, right? Created some businesses and the like. And so in order for someone like yourself to have a belief in regentrification, you got to have some type of an enabler, right? That gives you that provision. And what you, I believe, have found your way to is the fact that you own this golden ticket, that your service to these United States of America produced for you, which gives you access to this unique wealth transfer that is taking place at this time. And that wealth transfer allows you as a disabled veteran to identify a contract that the federal government has to award, win that contract, and then take that contract where the place of performance is at the discretion of the awardee and place it in the community that you're targeting. And what you want to do, and I want everybody that is within the sound of my voice to hear this, what you want to do is you want to inspire like-minded veterans who have the golden ticket that you have and who wear your social uniform to join you as you drive a focused effort to employ some regentrification in a community that you targeted. Because you by yourself will have an impact, but us as a community can have an influence. And so if you're listening to me and you wear my social uniform or you wear Mr. Hill's social uniform, we're asking you to take advantage of this unique point in time opportunity that's in front of you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And what really got me hyped and excited about this, right? From when I got out the military and I went into HVAC school, that was the first school I took up. We stayed there at a month. We went to Arizona, stayed in a hotel for a month, and it was that class was all veterans. So we were at when we went to school, did our thing. But when we came back from school and we were at the hotel and everybody was just hanging out, you saw the camaraderie. We didn't know, none of us knew each other. We were all veterans. But when it came, we were at the barracks, and I could tell us a deeper story. During that time, my first week there at school, I was my hotel room was broken into, and they took everything from me. The first week of a month being at HVAC school, they stole my wallet, they stole all my luggage, everything. The way and I only been in HVAC school for a week. The way that those veterans in that school came together, they only knew me for a week. They came together those guys was out hunting for blood. They were trying, the way they were patrolling that hotel sector. That's like the image I get in my mind when I'm building the community. It's like, man, imagine that as a force multiplier of people actually living in that community that has a vested interest in securing that community. That type of camaraderie, you don't get that everywhere. So that was like one of the things I did want to share that story, because that was one of the things that really excite me, because I understand the power and impact. And it wasn't just black people, it wasn't white people, it was everybody coming together like, oh, that is my brother. He's a veteran. You stole from him and we looking for you. So I did want to share that story, because it definitely excites me to build this community out for our veteran population.
Well, what excites me is to have a younger person like yourself, right, embrace ideas of old codgers like myself, right, or a seasoned, right, well-conceived ideas of some of the elders that I look to, like Dr. Claude Anderson. I've always thought Dr. Claude Anderson had a fabulous concept with his Powernomics. I've got the entire series here, in my library, but they never had the catalyst. And so for you to connect the dots between the fact that government contracting, especially in this unique season, could be used as the enabler for a Powernomics strategy. Wow. I mean, the inspiration that produced for me is it's unsettling. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that the viewers that are listening understand that this isn't a one-off thing. We're not trying to sell you on something. We're trying to create a rising tide that can go across this nation and produce a healing function while we're making this nation economically sound again, which will increase our security quotient, right? There's a direct correlation between how safe we are as a nation and how economically sound we are, right? When those two things get out of balance, what we have are things like the military and the monetary getting together because they feel it's necessary, and starting war in the desert because they believe that the economy is out of hand, right? So we want to keep things within equilibrium so that we don't have forces that don't have the utilitarian interest of the American people at heart. We don't want to get them as active as they are right now.
Yes, no, that's facts. That's fact. Now, on that note, on veteran communities, why do you think the veteran transition conversation primarily is focused on jobs, benefits, and services instead of ownership, contracts, and economic sovereignty? Why do you believe that is the case? And even if we look at the Take Care American Veterans Act, where they left out the Contract Our Veterans Act and veteran member business on that, it seems like it's just a more focused on, okay, I'll use the term feeding us. They're looking to feed us instead of us being the ones empowered. Why do you think it?
You have to take a look back at the events that precipitated the explosion of veterans in civil service positions. And this happened in the 90s, early 2000s, when we had what was known as a BRAC, a base realignment decision, where the government decided to close down multiple bases across the United States. And that reduction in bases also produced a reduction in forces. So the government was faced with a influx of over 400,000 new veterans, right? New civilians in the economy, and they had to find a way to transition those veterans into an economy that was, somewhat robust. And the powers that be, when they sat down and got into the room and talked about developing the transition assistance strategies, they looked at civil servant. They looked at the point benefit that veterans had in employment with states, local governments, and the like, and they geared most of the transition assistance support program toward employment, right? Towards resume building, right? Because this was low hanging fruit and it was easily measurable, as opposed to focusing them towards other areas like entrepreneurialism. And I'm not sure when this pivot happened, because when I talk with my good friend Bill Elmore, he's always telling me about, back in the day when, VA used to provide business loans to veterans, right? And he talks to me about, the good old days when the government was supporting the entrepreneurial interest of the veterans as they came back from war. And as a result, we had enormous explosions in our economic prowess as veterans in our community. And so I think that the reason that we have such a hyper focus on employment versus entrepreneurialism is systemic. It's because the people that were in the room when the decisions were made were more employee minded as opposed to being entrepreneurial minded, which is one of the reasons why I'm advocating that as we look to move the needle in changing the roadmap of freedom, that we get veterans in the room, that we get ourselves in the rooms where these decisions are made. You talk about the Take Care of Our Veterans Act, which is a $21 billion bill. I believe that act suffers from the same kind of modality and challenge that I just described about veterans and entrepreneurialism, right? I believe that the well-meaning staffers within the Congress, the Senate and the House got together in the silo and they said, let's build a bill that's going to finally take care of a lot of the issues that have been plaguing our veteran community. And so they pulled 60 of the highest rated bills, the highest supported bills that they had seen in the past, and they put those in a package and put together an omnibus bill and put a wrapper on it and put it out there as a bill that they expected the veteran community to just bend over and support, right? Because it's 21 billion. These are the kinds of errors that we can correct through collaborative engagement, through continuous and ongoing communication. And again, that's why I am building the Capital Matters community, so that we can make sure that veterans are in the room when these kinds of decisions are made. And I apologize for that long-winded answer.
No, that was perfect. That was perfect, because my next question was in regards to the nonprofit organizations working together, right? So we know they have different lanes. So we have the American Legion, DAV, Veterans of Foreign War, but they also have a couple of VSOs that are business oriented. Now, I know everybody has their niche that they focus on, but my question is, why isn't there more collaboration from these organizations, right? So now I'm not sure how many VSOs have the ability, like Elite SDVOB, that has the ability to, lobby, is that the correct terminology? Lobby for the veteran population, or be able to get in front of Congress. I don't know how many other organizations are like that, but if I know this organization has the direct ability to go to Congress about, advocate for veterans businesses, why would all the other organizations that support veteran businesses, why wouldn't they get behind that organization as a force multiplier? Why isn't it more unified? That's the question. Simple question.
And it's because veterans don't come, we're not a monolith, right? We're not a single constituency, right? We're multiple constituencies. And so, we needed multiple flavors to support the, Hispanic veterans of America, right? Because they have unique needs versus the, woman veterans of America. And so, there are unique constituent needs which are reasons why multiple nonprofits grew up to support those niche needs of our sub-veteran categories, our sub-veteran communities. And most of those organizations were developed under the 501c3 model, which are nonprofit models that allow them to go and receive donation and favor from their communities. But those organizations don't have the authorization, if you will, to lobby Congress. They don't have the authorization to influence their lawmakers without adhering to certain laws that are associated with government relations, right? You have to register as a lobbyist if you want to play within in that arena. But there are certain VSOs that were actually chartered by Congress, right, for the express purpose of bringing to them the interest and intentions of the veteran community, and the American Legion is one of those organizations. And there was a specific category of 501c that was created to support that community. And that category of 501c is 501c19. Now that's an old school category that the IRS isn't they're not issuing, they're not authorizing as liberally as they did back in the day. And so those veteran organizations, the nonprofits that are 501c19s, those organizations have the express ability, based on the construct of their nonprofit, to go and lobby lawmakers on behalf of veterans. And that's a long way around to say that all of our veteran service organizations were not created equal, right? We have lanes that we operate within, and there is a point where we should coalesce under one or the other organization for interest group needs. As you said, the Disabled Veterans of America, right? They deal in many instances with the most severe handicaps and amputations and those kinds of needs on the healthcare side of our community. The American Legion is a catch-all, right? They deal with a number of other areas, but there aren't many veteran service organizations out there that have congressional lobby capability that focus on business issues. The first one in the nation was the Elite Service Disabled Veteran Business Network. So it still remains the only nonprofit in the system that has the dual mission of driving the economic interest of the disabled veteran community and the legislative interest of the veteran community. And so I am behind that particular organization because we now need to take rack and pinion steering control over the budget of these United States, right? We've got to take rack and pinion steering over what happens to that $1.3 trillion worth of wealth that is moving into these consolidated contracts or being affected by some of these centralization shenanigans that are going on in the federal government. And if we're not in the game, we can't win the game.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, sir. And I did want to reiterate the message that I said before, guys. If you are a veteran, service disabled veteran, family member of a veteran, and you support this movement, you want to be a part of this economic revolution and this generational wealth transfer, we ask that you join the Elite SDVOB network. And if you don't want to join, that's fine. As we continue to educate, advocate, and push the message and push the mission for the veteran community, we ask that you donate, and you can scan that barcode, anything, and so we can continue fighting the good fight. But guys, on that note, I am Ratwan Hill, and that is the Mr. Walter Cotton III, and we'll catch y'all next time.